Okay, so we'll just finish our review that we were working on last night. So who can tell us why are we doing the reviews in the particular ones that we did, the 2520 in this one? Maybe you did put him to sleep, Robert.
So we could take the message to others.
Yeah, but a real specific reason to understand, yes, to take it to them.
It's to defend our waymarks.
Yeah, to defend, be able to defend our waymarks. Because I know I'm not completely ready on that. It was interesting after we got through as far as we did last night that I could see it a little. I mean, my memory was coming back, let's put it that way. But we'll skip back here to where he had the points here, the 12 prophetic events that occurred on September 11th, and this article covers the 4 winds. So that's what we're looking at, is the 4 winds. But what he showed was the reform lines. So if we're going and talking to a Levite, we wind up talking to a Levite, we need to be able to start and show them the reform lines. And we have 2 waymarks in our line down here. These 2 waymarks here are not given to us in inspiration. They are dates that were developed in the movement. And it was kind of interesting. I was giving that some thought about the various things that each dispensation, had to develop for their own. I don't know that they did it at the time. I don't know, but I mean, we could see how we know that there was something for each dispensation. So it would have to be that we would have to develop the message for our dispensation. So looking at Adventism and the Great Controversy, the reform line that inspiration gives us, she gives us the time of the end. She marks that at 1798. 1844, October 22nd. It doesn't say October 22nd, but 1844, it's a date that's given to us. She gives us the Sunday law, not when, but she gives us the Sunday law waymark, the close of probation, Daniel 12:1, and then second advent. So when you come down to our history, we have the Sunday law, Daniel 12:1, close of probation, and the second advent. So what we are wanting to do is to go back and be able to defend these waymarks so that we can teach these waymarks as well, defend them and be able to teach them. So we went through the Islamic powers. We went through the significance of August 11th, 1840, and that being the arrival of the empowerment of the first angel and the arrival of the second angel. And we know that that was also the arrival of the third angel. And we went through the first woe, second woe equals the third woe, showing that the first woe had the first woe going through Revelation 7:3 and 9:4, I believe it was, talking about in Revelation 9, talking about hurting not, and hurting and then killing. So the first woe represented hurting, and the second woe killing. Who was being hurt and who was not being hurt? What was the purpose, or what did we learn last night about that?
Islam would be protecting God's people, or at least, distracting God's enemies from hurting God's people.
Yeah. So they were like a protector to God's people, and whether it be a protection or distracting. And that was, he was making the point that Revelation 7:3 was the intent, the original intent was the Sunday law period. But we've made application to Revelation 7:3 and bringing it to 9:11 with the bringing down of the twin towers. And what do we call, is that the right word? What do we call that? What does what have we learned that to be, 9/11 to be?
Harbinger.
A harbinger. Oh. Got it. Okay. A harbinger. So is a harbinger to what? 9/11 is a harbinger to what?
Harbinger to the third woe after well, after close of probation.
Close. Think that through a little bit more. The harbinger was,
The Islamic power
yes,
being fully unleashed.
there you go. That's the one I was looking for. Fully unleashed. And to what? If the first and second woe was, one was to hurt and one was to kill.
The third woe would be after the close of probation, it'd be to kill.
Okay, to fully unleash. So 9/11 was a harbinger pointing to Daniel 12:1. The close of probation. Yeah, I do have those boxes on the screen. Hang on one second. Sorry. I was trying to look at the chat. Okay. So now you can't see them, right? Okay. Okay, so so the harbinger, 9/11 was a harbinger pointing us to the close of probation. And we didn't, that passage isn't in this study, but we were talking about 9T, the passage was in there, and then life sketches as well. And where Elder Parmenter had laid out and shown that the passage in 9T, I think life sketches too. I wish I would have saved that. And I don't think he's here with us to put it in there. I have to go back to the chat in the notes or in the file later. But that that 9T was speaking of when a time when there's no more mercy. So whereas FFA took that passage and went from there and combined it with the passage of New York City with the passage on about Nashville, and that helped them to come and develop their prophecy of what was going to have to take place in Nashville, which did not, which was also, as the previous study talked about, it wasn't, there was a time when there was no new message. And that was all wrong, but it showed in the passage that that was a time that was describing a time, the period of after the close of probation when there would be no more mercy. So if there's no more mercy, it has to be what? What time is it? What time period is it if there's no more mercy?
After
Close of
the
probation.
Yeah, close of probation. Okay. So we got to, this was first hurt and then kill, and the army of Rome. Who is the army of Rome in our day?
United States.
America.
United States. So, okay. And we saw that the third woe began at 9/11. We just kind of basically reviewed that. And so this is where we left off, was the four winds are seen as an angry horse. So we've seen how the four winds of Revelation 7:1 are identified with the Islamic power of Revelation 9:4. When you trace that back to the winds in the east wind through Genesis and a few other places, it's back in the notes, traced it back to then Genesis and Muhammad himself. Well, I think we're actually going to break that part down now with the horse. But so so the four winds in Revelation 7:1 are identified with the Islamic power of Revelation 9:4, the Arabian Saracens, indicating the four winds are also a prophetic Islamic power. So Revelation 9:7 introduces the symbol of horses to the prophecy, specifically battle horses or war horses. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto the horse, prepared unto battle. And in the second woe, in verse 16, the, hold on 1 second. Okay, in the, let's see, in the second woe, in verse 16, the army of the horsemen, and verse 17, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. So it is important to understand that the Islamic powers in the first and second woes are represented as war horses. If we employ the rule of first mention to the subject of Islam, the Bible takes us to Genesis 16:12, and he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. Here, Ishmael is described as a wild man, but the Hebrew word for wild is, I don't know if you say that, onager. Is that how you say that? Anybody know? Onager? 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 Or wild ass. So Ishmael is described as a wild ass of a man. In other words, he's likened to a wild donkey or onager. So the first mention of the forefather of Islam uses the symbol of a wild horse. Furthermore, the 1843 and 1850 charts represent the Islamic powers of the first and second woes with war horses. So to teach our doctrines in the order in which God gave them, then after 9/11, we would present the 2520, which we actually kind of started backwards on that. If I had been seeing where we were going, we might have started at 1989. I think I said that last night, but my original plan was just to work on being able to defend the 2520 and understand time setting. So it seemed like a good idea to be able to defend all the waymarks. So, so if you teach our doctrines in the order which God gave them, then after 9/11, you might present the 2520. So this is a good opportunity to introduce the validity of the two charts to your audience as to the 2520, as the 2520 is both the cornerstone and central column of both charts. And there's references there of early writings, 13 MR and 5 MR. So we have alleged that Revelation 7:3, describing the sealing of the 144,000, can be paralleled with Revelation 9:4, the first woe. In Revelation 7:1, we are told that the four winds were restrained from hurting the earth until the 144,000 are sealed. We've also seen how Islamic powers were restrained from hurting the army of Rome after 9/11. And does anybody remember the date of that? So we saw how the Islamic powers were restrained. When were the Islamic powers restrained after hurting the United States in 9/11? Somebody remember that date?
November 9th?
Yeah. So we've seen, let's see how they're restrained. So who does Ellen White identify as the four winds?
Islam?
Islam. The angry horse, the four winds. Go ahead and read that if you want, Linda.
Angels are holding the four winds, which are represented as an angry horse, seeking to break loose and rush over the face of the whole earth, bearing destruction and death in its path.
Yeah, I kind of said it wrong backwards, so that was my fault. So the four winds she identifies as an angry horse, and he just walked us through the war horses in Revelation, several verses in Revelation 9 of the war horses, tracing us all the way back to Genesis with Muhammad, or not Muhammad, I know I said Muhammad before, Ishmael. I think I said Muhammad before, Ishmael, and referring to Ishmael as a wild ass, or putting it to a horse, putting Ishmael to a horse. So Sister White likens, Ellen White likens the four winds to an angry horse. Revelation 9 and Genesis 16:12, Revelation 9 and Genesis 16:12 liken Islam to battle horses and a wild donkey. A wild horse is obviously an angry horse, and it is equally obvious that a horse would be angry in battle. When any animal is fighting, they are angry. Ellen White is here taking the symbol for Islam and connecting it to the symbol of the four winds. So the symbol of Islam, the horses, and connecting the horses to the symbol of the four winds. So the horses equal, the angry horses equal the four winds. So Revelation 9 symbolizes the Islamic powers as war horses, and these are parallel verses to Revelation 7:1-3, which are the four winds. And Ellen White says the four winds are represented as an angry horse. In other words, the four winds of Revelation 7:1-3 have to be the same powers as the angry horses of Revelation 9. So the four winds of Revelation 7:1-3 have to be the same powers as the angry horses of Revelation 9, which Smith and Ellen White definitively identify as Islamic powers. Revelation 9:3 and 7 represent the Islamic powers of the first woe as locusts. And as we have seen, Exodus 10:13 says the east wind brought the locusts. So it would seem that the four winds, and specifically the east wind, is a symbol of the Islamic powers of Bible prophecy. Inspiration describes the four winds as natural disasters and political strife. That's Testimonies to Ministers 444. War and Revolution, Great Controversy 439-3, the Maranatha 175-2 and 257, paragraph 3, Jeremiah 49:36 and 37. So the four winds as natural disasters and political strife. We know the four winds are so called because they come from the four corners of the earth, Revelation 7:1. So while the four winds include the Islamic powers of Bible prophecy, it is the east wind, which is specifically these said powers. Midian is in Arabia, east of the glorious land, and the Middle East, or Near East, if you will. Today it is known as Madian, is that how you say that? In Saudi Arabia. And we have also noted how the Midianites are symbolized by locusts. That's Judges 7:12. So whilst in our application of Daniel 11:40, America is the whirlwind of the King of the North, and the south wind of Acts 27:13 represents the political strife and war of the King of the South. The east wind is the political strife and war of the Islamic powers of Bible prophecy. Lastly, there is one more text in the Bible which mentions the four winds. It is the prophecy of Ezekiel 37, verses 9-11, where the breath of God comes from the four winds, and the dead, dry bones representing God's church come to life. While the original intent of this passage would surely be for Ezekiel's time and for the literal ancient whole house of Israel, Ellen White applies it to the Sunday law time period when she seems to combine the four winds of Revelation 7 with the four winds of Ezekiel 37. It is in the above passage which we have just looked at. Angels are holding back the four winds, represented as an angry horse seeking to break loose and rush over the face of the whole earth, bearing destruction and death in its path. Shall we sleep on the very verge of the eternal world? Shall we be dull and cold and dead? Oh, that we might have in our churches the spirit and breath of God breathed into his people, that they might stand upon their feet and live. So we can make application to Ezekiel 37, 9-11, placing it at 9-11 in exactly the same way as we do with Revelation 7. So in conclusion, the second waymark for the Millerite line is an event during the second woe on August 11th, 1840, when a prophetic Islamic power was restrained by the West. This characteristic can therefore be adopted into the second waymark for the 144,000, which we see occurring at 9/11. Under the first woe, an Islamic power hurt the army of Rome, which we also see repeated at 9/11. The symbols for Islam include the four winds and an angry horse. We see the four winds restrained at the time of the sealing of the 144,000. And we also see the language of Revelation 7:3 as almost identical as Revelation 9:4. We know for sure that Revelation 9:4 identifies an Islamic power, as do the angry horses of verses 7, 9, 16, and 17. And Ellen White understood the four winds of Revelation 7:1 to be represented by an angry horse. Hence, there is a strong indication that when this waymark repeats in our time at 9/11 and the third woe begins, we should see the sealing of the 144,000 has begun as well. But in order to understand this, we first need to look at the second angel's message and why it arrived at 9/11. Any comments on that? Go back to the beginning real quick. Hope I don't make you dizzy there. Okay. So we see the four winds restrained and the third woe begin at 9/11. So be thinking on these things. I'm glad Susan says she needed the review. Be thinking on these things, because what we're going to do is, like we did with the 2520, and we'll still do more with that as well, is invite any one of you to step up and do a review so that we get this solid and understand it and able to defend it, so that we can come to walk through it, perhaps like we did with the 2520 without even notes, but being able to walk through with a whiteboard and teach it. So, so this particular article addressed the four winds that were restrained and the third woe began. Is there someone that can give us a summary of that, what we just went through? And we kind of did a summary, but if there's somebody else that wants to repeat it back. And while we think on that and somebody volunteers, I'm going to find the next document.
I just have a question on the notes.
Mhm.
Are you sending those out?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can. I think
Yeah.
I did. I think I did the
Or
first one.
did you?
The first one, yeah.
Okay. Is it on was that for Wednesday night?
It was Friday night, for Friday night. I sent them out
Oh, you
yesterday.
did send them out on Friday night.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you didn't get it, I can resend it.
Yeah, yeah, I'd appreciate it. Because my notes that I took from Aaron, I mean, I had piecemeal, but I need to put the whole thing together.
Yeah,
And that way I can really understand things more clearly with your note, with the notes. And those notes were from Aaron, right?
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then when I meet with him, I'll have those notes plus what I took. And he wanted to do sort of a review with me with it, see where, if I'm have all the right facts here down.
well, when I, oh, go ahead. Sally.
Everything in order.
Yeah.
Instead of, trying to fill in things like I did the other night, which, that weren't there and I need more clarity on. So I see a full picture here.
Yeah, that's what I want to try to help with all of us to get that full picture so that we can walk someone through 1989 reform lines. The first angel arrives, but you have to start them with those reform lines like we did back there on the board, and what's in that document where Aaron has, he has also Noah and Elijah and ancient Israel, the Alpha and the Omega of ancient Israel, and line those all up together, and how you take the characteristics of each of those waymarks to then teach us of our line, and the thing that the challenge of being able to show them how 1989 opened up. And so 1989 did not open up based on a message of time per se, but you have the magazine called Time of the End magazine, right? So I don't know I don't want to speak wrong on this part of it, but they didn't understand the 2520 and didn't understand time setting at the time, but it was still a message on time. Why was it a message on time? 1989. You're muted if you're going to talk, Susan.
It was the time of the end. Daniel 11:40. Is that what you're?
But how was it, even though we didn't know, how was it a message on time? You know how she says, and I don't know if this is right to say, but you know how Elder Tess talks about the whole message being encapsulated and then it's unpacked? So the whole message is there in 1989. So time setting is a part of the message, but we didn't know about time setting until 2012. So how was time setting there in 1989?
Was it like the 151 or something, or
Yeah, the 126.
126?
I think the 151 as well. We can do a backup, but I know it's the first one. So 1989 minus 151. Whoops.
$1868 maybe.
So the 151, the 151 takes you 1838. So I don't know, but I know the 126 does, and that's why I thought I'd check that one since you said that one. But the 126 takes you to 1863.
Okay.
So, but that was before time setting was understood. So time setting was there, and that was another evidence of 1989 as well. Was the 126 from the 2520. And I think I did write on the list up there of the lines, but I already closed that file. But maybe if you take that file that I sent, I'll send it again. I'll send it out again. But if you take that file and take that list of the 12 prophetic events that he's marking, I'm sure that you can just take those 12 as we do these reviews and get comfortable with those 12 and be able to give some evidences to each of them. Does that make sense? So if we can remember those, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we can remember those 12. I'm going to pull it up again real quick.
Okay.
And that would be a nice start to be able to go through this. So the four winds being restrained. What did we just learn the four winds are?
That's the restraint of Islam.
Yeah, what does Ellen White say the four winds are? What does she connect them to?
I think she said there were the whole world, the strife of the four corners of the world, and Islam is included in that.
Let's go back down to that.
That angry horse that's seeking to break loose.
Yeah, that's the one that I was looking for. That she says that it's the angels are holding the four winds, represented as an angry horse seeking to break loose. Okay, so she takes it to the angry horse, the four winds to the angry horse. And then where do you go from you got the four winds by inspiration as the angry horse, and how do we identify the angry horse?
Through Ishmael,
True.
wild man.
And that's one of them.
I don't.
Start from where we kind of walked through in the beginning. We went to Genesis. We didn't go to Genesis first. Where were we at first in seeing the angry horse? Where were we seeing horses in the Bible?
Was it Genesis 16, 12?
That would be for Ishmael.
Ishmael.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be for Ishmael. So where were we seeing the horses, the battle horses?
Okay.
I think on the study, the Islamic powers, where do we see the Islamic powers?
Revelation 9.
Revelation 9.
Yeah.
And so in Revelation 9, you see these Islamic powers introduced as horses, battle horses. So the four winds are the angry horse, and the horses can be traced to Islamic powers and traced all the way back to the beginning of Islam. Islam would be all the way back to Ishmael, who is a wild horse. So did that make sense
Yes.
on that particular point? Can you repeat it, back, Jackie?
Oh dear. You know, when you're talking, I say, oh yeah, that's right.
So do
that's
I.
right," But then try to summarize it. Um, Well, it's the battle. I have three things. I have the battle, and I have angry horses equals the four winds,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I also have a quote from Ellen White and I think there might be more explanation to this, and it's three selected messages, 409. I did not look that up though, so that's something I can review. I can look at that. So where we see then, if this goes to the first time that we hear about the angry horses, is we would get that from Genesis 16:12, which is Ishmael. That might be verse 11, I'm not sure. So Ishmael represents the wild ass, right?
Right.
Okay, now you just have to give me a few hints to get over to summing that up.
Does somebody else want to help her?
I got that down. It goes to Revelation 9 then, where we see that in Revelation 9, verse 4, is it? 9:4?
Yeah.
Mhm. And then it goes on, there's more verses there, 5 and 6, which are representative of the smoke and the locusts. And the locusts represent Islamic fighters. That's what I have in my notes.
Yeah, taking you back to, I think he covered that in this document, taking you back to in particular the east wind, because it was the east wind that brought the locust.
Okay, yeah. You'd have to have that, the wind, to blow those locusts in, which would make sense. Okay. Now I need some help. I hope I didn't sidetrack anyone here.
Does somebody else want to try to review point 1? The four winds are restrained and the third woe began.
Oh, it's 9/11, right?
Yeah, but we have to prove it.
Oh, we went to war. George Bush went to war with them. What was it? 2003, November 9, was it? And that would have been a restraining.
Yeah, bring us, and you're bringing in the restraint part, bring us to the restraint in Millerite history.
Oh,
That tells us that, and that's
Christian
okay.
powers of Europe. The Christian powers of Europe. Turkey was called the sick man of the East, and the four Christian powers. Russia was one of them, had to come to the aid of Turkey, and it had to do with a conflict between Turkey and Egypt.
Okay, so that was the end of the 150 years, correct?
Oh, that would have been the end of the
But yeah,
390
91, yeah, sorry.
years,
my bad.
15 days.
Okay, so now take it back to where you were headed, the 9/11.
9/11, well, that would have been Third Woe. When they hit the trade towers, and when George Bush, made the proclamation, we're at war with terror. You're either for us or against us. He announced his war with Islam and terrorism. And that would have been, I suppose, the restraint. I'm not sure what else could have been. That's what it used to be, that's what Jeff used to always proclaim.
How do we, how do I ask the question? How do we know what the third woe looks like?
Because we look at the first and second woes.
Right. And so what were the key things in the first and second woes?
Well, they said that Islam would strike suddenly and unexpectedly with explosives. And yeah, that was a main part.
Well, what was the key characteristic of the first woe that we took?
Well, they attacked Rome, and they were going to hurt men for 150 years.
The hurt, that's where I was looking for.
Yeah.
So the characteristic of the first woe is to hurt the army of Rome. And then what's the characteristic of the second woe?
Kill.
To kill the armies of Rome. So who can pick up from there? To hurt and to kill. How do we get that to be the third woe beginning at 9/11? And you can continue if you want, Linda.
Well, they certainly killed a lot of people, 3,000 people in the trade towers. And then, there was the economic hurt. That's another thing that always happens with Islam. Whoever they attack, whether it's Rome or the United States, whoever, and Russia felt this too at the end of the that first 1979 to 1989 10-year war in Afghanistan. The Mujahideen were involved, and we were bad. This is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, and they were using Islamic people. Anyway, it just it hurt Russia economically. And the United States has what they did. I mean, they stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years. They attacked Iraq, which was, nobody could understand where that rationale was coming from. They claimed there was weapons of mass destruction, but they never could prove that. And there's economic damage. It costs money to wage war for long, long periods of time. And from 1299 to 1449, the first one, and then 1449 onward to 1840. I mean, that's years and years and years and years. The money it cost. I mean, the Catholic Church, the Crusades, they just leave, whoever they're attacking, they just leave them economically devastated, as well as, killing people. And that was very evident after 9/11. By 2002, I was watching friends of mine who were, they were making good money, working in corporate America and working in IT. All of a sudden, they were losing their jobs. Somebody I knew, a couple of people I knew personally, 3, 2 in the church and then 1 outside of the church. And none of them were really ever able to go back to doing what they were doing. There were 2 people in IT and then another lady in corporate America. And they ended up going in completely different directions after that. And I don't think the economy ever really recovered. And then came the 2008 housing downturn. And it was just more woe on top of woe. And there was economic and militarily. You know, when they struck the Pentagon, that was hitting, you know, the military. I think Jeff used to say there was economic and military strength were the two horns of America, the United States, that they were, you know, attacking. The trade towers represented the economic, you know, power of the United States, and the Pentagon represented the military. And then they hit the earth, Pennsylvania, symbolic, you know, strike. Yeah, so economic and military strength was what they were attacking. And yeah, it affected the United States in both. And, you know, after George Bush waged that war in Iraq, and then the Abu Ghraib thing, Guantanamo Bay, I mean, the United States took a political hit because, you know, in a short period of time, it was evident to the entire world what the United States was doing. You know, they were torturing the detainees in Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib prison, I don't know, wherever that was. That was another part of the story. And so the world began to see the United States was becoming more of a bully, which is what Gorbachev was trying to prevent, you know, with the way he wanted to do things. But George Bush Sr., you know, proclaimed this new world order under a unilateral power of the United States. And the United States, after the fall of the Soviet Union, just began acting like a unilateral bully, doing pretty much whatever it wanted to do, regardless of what Russia wanted. And that's what inflamed Putin to the extent that he, you know,
So
now he's.
So what did we see in this particular study, how the third woe, I'm trying to think of how to ask the question. Where does Ellen White take us with I think of the question. What does she give us about the Sunday law when it comes to the third woe?
Well, you know what I remember, big points I remember from years ago. I can't remember in this specific study, but the Sunday law is basically, it's an attack against God's people in some way, shape, or form. And Islam usually strikes around the time of the Sunday law, if not before it. That's what people used to say about 9/11, you know, oh, there was going to be a Sunday law, but Islam struck because we weren't ready. And so, and I remember the conversation from yesterday evening you all were having about, you know, well, is Islam going to strike? And in the middle of hearing all that, I thought, well, yeah, wouldn't that be this summer or before that? If the Supreme Court's going to vote, you know, against Roe v. Wade and all that, LGBTQ, then wouldn't we be expecting Islam to do some damage, attacking our God's enemies and our enemies about that time? But the two tend to coincide because one's kind of a cause of the other, or an instigator of the other.
So in other words, Linda's saying what she just said would be the four winds are unleashed.
But when does that happen?
That's Sunday law, after the Sunday law.
When after the Sunday law? When are they fully unleashed?
Close of probation.
Close of probation.
Close of probation,
Yeah.
which would be the next period after the Sunday law.
Yeah.
It follows the Sunday law.
So who remembers? She takes Revelation 7:3 and she applies it to the Sunday law. What did we do from there? And what does she say about that? Revelation 7:3. What does it say? Need me to find it again?
Yeah.
I already passed it. Revelation 7:3. I don't remember where it's at here. So what does Revelation 7:3 say?
Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads.
Right. And she applies that. I was trying to find it in the notes. I know I probably passed it. Oh, here we go. Okay. And she applies it to the Sunday law. So we take it as an application and put it at 9/11. Why?
Well, it's kind of a reference to Revelation 9:4. Yeah, it's a direct reference. And Revelation 9 is about Islam.
Yeah.
So 9/11, we saw the first woe. What we're reviewing here is the first woe plus the second woe equals the third woe. The first woe, we see that there was a hurting of the armies of Rome, showing in Revelation 7:3 of a not hurting the earth, the sea, or the trees until the servants of God are sealed. So the sealing time is going on. Whenever this is, the sealing time is going on. She applies it to the Sunday law, and this is a Islamic power that protects, or the word he used, or harasses, protects God's people or harasses the enemies of God as a distraction, so that the Sunday law, the message and the loud cry, you can all swell, and the loud cry comes and give the final warning to the world. And we take that as an application and put it at 9/11 as the restraint that came on November 9 of 2001 after the strike. And so 9/11 then is I think we already reviewed this part, so I don't know if I want to ask you again, or 9/11 tells us what? It's the first woe where there's a protection to hurt not. The first woe is repeated in the third woe, and then the second woe is what?
Well, both the first and the second woe is repeated in the third woe,
Right.
right? So first woe is just to hurt, and second woe was to kill. And so in the third woe, we should see both aspects of that. And so the first woe, so 9/11 that we got from the Millerite line of August 11, 1840, that was the Trade Center. Yes, people did die, but it did not cripple the glorious land. It did not, it just hurt. It stung, but the final unleashing of the angry horse, which is still the third woe, that comes after close of probation, that's going to bring the army of Rome completely down.
Which is the United States.
Which is the United States.
It was really interesting listening to that, the rest of Obama's speech during lunch. I think it was Jackie that said the commentaries were saying it was too little too late. And having the foresight of knowing with what we know, with everything that we've been learning, that what leads to the fully loosing Islamic powers, because we are seeing the choice that the people of the United States are going to make. And it's really, I don't know, I guess it just comes in waves, as to me anyway, sometimes in the understanding. So when we go back to Eden and we see the political campaigning for Satan's government or God's government, here we are living at a time where all those trees you can eat from freely and live, or choose the one tree that you can't have, which means total freedom with no rules. Which one are you going to vote for? So we see them, we see the United States and know the United States is going to vote for that, for the kingdom of Satan, which then brings which leads to the close of probation that brings the fully unleashing of the Islamic powers to destroy, to kill the armies of the United States. Well, we'll leave it at that with this one instead of starting the next one. So we can start with the next one fresh, since we don't want to try to dig into a whole new one in 10-15 minutes. Any other comments before we, does anybody, if you struggle to understand it, don't hesitate to speak up, so that we can take it point by point until we get it, so that we all move together on this. Is there anybody that struggles to understand what we're talking about with the third woe? And don't be shy. Because the idea is that we all go through this journey all the way through. Anybody?
I just think that each time we review, we get, we see some information that wasn't there before. And so we pick up new things. And by picking up new things, that just adds on to our knowledge base. And so our knowledge of this will be increasing in our own minds. And where I mean, it's not just this, but anything that we review, it's like there's something always there that we haven't seen before, and you know, all these reviews are necessary and good.
Yeah. It was funny when, way back in the early days of my beginning to read the Bible, and the way that sometimes I would come to understand things, which is, I think, what you're describing, but I mean, that seems the way it works. I would read something and I didn't even know what I read, right? Go through the day or what have you, and some circumstance will happen. And then it's all of a sudden, oh, that's what that meant, you know? and so when we go through these presentations, in these studies, stuff goes over our head. And we can kind of look at that if we pull back the telescope and look at the broader view, that all that we've put in and that we didn't understand, and then time passes and we see the events unfold, and then we go back and watch something, and then we see it, if that made sense. We see it and we understand it because of the experience. Did that make sense?
Yeah, sometimes I know, like for me, I don't know how to ask the right questions because I don't know what I don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I say, as we review, you know, then things just click more as we continue to review and review.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll go through, there's 4 of these studies. We'll go through them and probably fill in more on our Wednesday nights, since usually our Friday and Sabbath is covered with the May 2020 to August 2021, so that we can get really grounded and firm and able to think on this, because I want us to work on somebody leading a class, not presenting a study, but leading a class on these topics so that we can get the practice at leading a class, not a presentation, to where we can get to where we're mostly without notes, and being able to draw out things on the board and go through the points together, answering questions. And if we're wrong, there's no shame in being wrong. It's in the group that we learn it and get more solidified together, so that we're all stronger and all ready to be able to teach and defend the waymarks. And I was thinking that, you know, certainly after we do these 4, then we would go to, he has studies on Daniel as well, on 1989 as well. So we'll probably go through those so that we can be able to defend and teach the waymarks, but also then maybe review a little bit of Acts 27 as well, because that would take us back to the dispensation of 2014 to 2018. And 2014 to 2019, in the bringing out the King of the North and the King of the South. So again, just and if you don't feel comfortable saying anything openly here, if you have trouble understanding it, private message me if you want to, so that we can work out how we can better understand this. But be thinking about volunteering. Anybody that wants to be thinking about volunteering to do that wants to take on a review with basically without notes, and being able to walk us through the steps. Or even if in this one, you know, after we go through these 4 studies, after go through his 4 articles, that we can be able to, like we just kind of did, broke down the first one here. So keep that in mind, that as we go through each of these, then what we got to do is come back to these 12 prophetic events and be able to give a, I don't want to say a summary, but we're going to repeat it back. What point 1 was, and give us a little bit of that. Like this one here is the 4 winds or the angry horse. The angry horse is Islamic powers. The Islamic powers is also the East and the locusts, and go through that. And the restrained powers go through the first and second woe together, being equaling the third woe, and showing using the verses Revelation 7:3 and Revelation 9:4, showing that they're to hurt the earth, not to hurt the earth. So there's a protection going on while they're attacking the armies of Rome, and bringing that to 9/11 and the close of probation, so we can be able to do that. And then when we finish Article 2, then we'll go back point by point, and so be thinking that along those lines, so that you can repeat it back. The first angel's message empowered, you know, so that you can repeat the steps back. So, and if somebody wants to lead Article 2 instead of me, I don't have a problem with that either. So you can let me know. I'll look at the schedule later, but it's probably, I can pull it up right now, probably Wednesday's open, but I'll have to get with Christine so that she knows what we're talking about doing here. But I'm going to look at it real quick. I just won't pull it on share screen just yet. Yeah, because next Wednesday is actually, this coming Wednesday is actually open. So we'll go through the Article 2 on Wednesday. So anybody that wants to be with us, we'll go through Article 2 on Wednesday.
I had a question from the previous study.
Yeah.
On the line where everybody's like taking their shoes off and the horses and everything like that, that's representing us giving up conservatism, right?
That's what we were discussing, yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff, but yeah, that's definitely got to be part of it. Because he called it, was that the whole question?
Yeah, pretty much. I thought maybe that was a newer current understanding.
Yeah, because we were looking at how God, why did God call, it was in a couple other studies, but why did God call a conservative? Why didn't he just call a liberal? If we've got to come to the liberal point, why didn't he? Because liberals don't really care about what God says. The liberals in Adventism, they're going to do what they want to do anyways. They're not going to do, but a conservative Adventist wants to obey and follow God. So while we've been not carefully reading and reading literal to literal, we're reading don't do this and don't do that and what have you, all that's packed into that. But we showed a willingness to want to know and follow God. So he takes a conservative movement and leads it out of conservatism into liberalism. And since we are willing to follow as good conservative Adventists, when we understand that God is leading this movement, then we can trust that it's God that's taking us from this conservative to the liberal, and we will follow. So that's what I mentioned it earlier, because that's what I thought too, that the leaving all the baggage behind, leaving and having to shed all that off, as a lot of it has to do with conservatism. It seemed, I'm sure there's other things, but all the wrong doctrines and everything else, but definitely conservatism has to be part of that.
Mhm.
That was my thought.
Mm.
So anybody else? Christina, are you there? Would you like to close us in prayer? If you're there. Maybe we'll have Linda, if you want to close us in prayer.
Dear Father in heaven, Lord, now I said it wrong. Dear holy God, we thank you, Lord, for the Sabbath and for the time that remains and the opportunity to study and get everything right, and understand everything correctly. And pray that all the studies that we're going over and reviewing will stick in our minds. And when the time comes when we must repeat them, the words will automatically come to us as we interact with other people. In Adventism, and later the world, please continue to refine us and prepare us to be weapons against God's enemies and our enemies. Even as the stone strikes the statue, use us, Lord, as a strike against conservatism and the religious right and the atheism and libertarianism and all the other isms that are gone contrary to the truth. Pray that you'll be with us in the coming week, and that you'll be with the elders, Elder Tess, Elder Perminder, and all the others who are striving to help us understand all these things, and prepare us each week for new messages as they come. And I thank you, Lord, for hearing and answering my prayer. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
And